Reflect about the interview excerpts that you saw in exercise 4.1, and keep in mind that these were real interviews conducted about racial inequality. Not only did Bill and Jim not understand structural racism, they completely denied its existence. They also went to great lengths to protect the status quo, going so far as to make comparisons to wild animals and buying beer. And these are the kinds of linguistic gymnastics that Bonilla Silva was observing in his interviews. In addition to abstract liberalism and naturalization, Bonilla Silva witnessed two more frames. The third was cultural racism. In this frame, participants resorted to cultural arguments as justification for racial inequality. And the frame goes something like this. Racism is over now and everything is equal. So if people of color are still not getting jobs, getting an equal education, or experiencing any other sort of inequality, it's because there's something wrong with them culturally that prevents them from succeeding. A common area this frame gets used is education. So for example, someone using this frame might say that Black students graduate high school at lower rates because culturally, Black families don't place the same level of value on education. Not only is this not true, but you have also learned about the various barriers students of color encounter in the school-to-prison pipeline. All of this background gets thrown out the window in favor of a blame-the-victim mentality. To people who use this frame, it's not a racialized social system that's a barrier. It's people of color. The final frame that Bonilla Silva identified was minimization. And in this frame, participants said they did not believe discrimination was still a central factor affecting people of color. They acknowledge that racism still exists on some level, but they tend to view it as more overt, such as hate crimes. They can acknowledge racism in that form and denounce it. However, when they have to confront the more covert, hidden forms of structural racism, they often try to make the impact seem less than what it really is. A common phrase you might hear from someone using this frame is, "It's better now than it was in the past," or "We've come such a long way." People who use this frame also try to find an alternate explanation and make people of color question their interpretation of the situation. So for example, if a person of color says they are discriminated against in hiring, someone using this frame might try to convince them that race had nothing to do with it by saying something like, "Are you sure? Like maybe the other person just had better credentials." There are a few issues with minimization. First, it denies people of color their experience. When racism isn't something you experience directly, your ability to raise question about people of color's experience is very limited. Second, it completely diminishes the reality of structural racism. By emphasizing a time when things were quote-unquote worse, for example, it absolves one of responsibility in confronting racism in the present. That may make the person feel more comfortable in the moment, but it comes at the expense of the well-being of people of color. So now that we've covered the 4 central frames of colorblind racism, I want to give you all an opportunity to apply your learning to the last 2 frames. So please pause your lecture here. I know we typically do online exercises at the end of the video, but for this time I'd like you to just pause the video here and complete exercise 4.2 before continuing on with this video. So now that you have gotten a chance to apply your learning to the last 2 frames, I want to make a couple points about what ties all of these frames together. The first is a denial, dismissal, and avoidance of facing the realities of structural racism. In each of these frames, white participants went to great lengths to rationalize structural racism as either a violation of their rights, a natural occurrence, the result of a cultural deficiency among people of color, or they tried to minimize the role of race. And even though this data is from 1997 and 1998, more current studies have found similar trends. A poll from Quinnipiac University in 2017 found that when asked how serious prejudice against minority groups is in the United States, only 39% of white respondents felt it was very serious, compared to 66% of Black respondents. And there's another commonality across each of these four frames: ideology. Chapter 2 of your book defined ideology as a set of ideas and beliefs reflecting the needs and aspirations of individuals, groups, classes, or cultures that form the basis for political, economic, and other systems. Remember that race is a social construct, a system of meaning attached to skin tone that has been developed and internalized over hundreds of years. And Bonilla says the following about ideology in his study on colorblind racism. Ideologies are about meaning in the service of power. They are expressions at the symbolic level of the fact of dominance. As such, the ideologies of the powerful are central in the production and reinforcement of the status quo. They comfort rulers and charm the ruled, much like an Indian snake handler. And whereas the rulers receive solace by believing they are not involved in the terrible ordeal of creating and maintaining inequality, the ruled are charmed by the almost magic qualities of a hegemonic ideology. When racial ideologies are as deeply embedded as they are in our society, simple policy changes aren't going to completely unravel them. This doesn't mean nothing can be done. But hegemonic ideologies about race are what make it possible for people to explain away racism, even when it is right in their face. Ideology is a very powerful thing, and when used in this way, is a huge barrier to intercultural praxis. It prevents us from fully hearing the experiences of people from a different social location, and it impedes our ability to understand our own social location. And so this is why next week we will be taking a closer look at how ideology is constructed. As we transition into next week, we will be focusing on media industries and the culture of capitalism. You will be learning about the culture of capitalism, as well as exploring culture of capitalism in media industries. And your second unit assignment will also be due next week, kind of covering similar topics. So keeping what you learned about social constructions, socialization, and colorblind racism in mind, think about how it connects to media as an industry, the use of ideology in media, and be thinking about the links between media production, ideology, and the determining edge. So this completes the lecture on colorblind racism. And as always, let me know if you have any questions about the content. Thank you.